Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, presented by Zwift, the online cycling platform that's made my training in particular very fun. Scheldeprijs wrap up, as well as Basque Country Stage 3. There's also Circuit Cyclissat, the Scheldeprijs women's race, which is a 1-1 race. The men's is .pro, I believe. So a lot of cycling on today and some good racing, in particular at Scheldeprijs, which looks flat, looks boring, and it can be boring. Terneuzen in the Netherlands to Schoten, which is on the border with Antwerp. I think that's still in the Netherlands.
No.
It looks flat and boring, but today it was an incredibly hard race. I think some of it off camera. I think Carlos Ozils, one of the riders on lanternerouge.com.au, whipped out the Latvian rider Emil Slepin's data from the first third of this race, it's just all in this exposed section bordered by some sort of ocean, the Black Sea, not sure. And he did maybe his best ever 1 hour normalized power. And yeah, we had Bennett here, Jakobsen, Merlier, Philipsen, Christoph, McLean, Buani, a lot of good sprinters. Groenewegen. What group composition did we have, Benji, with Bora with numbers again? Last year they had their worst ever lead out in history. This year they had numbers again.
Yeah, certainly numbers in that group that got away in those echelons before the broadcast started. And it included the likes of Sam Bennett, Ryan Mullen, Jordi Meus, and also Danny van Poppel. So that's a solid amount of riders when it comes to Bora, I'd say. And then you look at the riders from the other teams. You've got Philipsen Merlier, which is Alpecin, getting 2 riders in there as well. But is there 2 sprinters? So then the idea comes to mind, okay, we saw them not working together at Gent-Wevelgem. Perhaps that might occur today again. Rudiger Zelig is in this group, but not the lead for Lotto Soudal, nor any teammates for Rudiger Zelig. So not exactly a good situation for them. No Quickstep in this group. We've also got Casper van Uden here together with a teammate, Sam Welsford, both for DSM. Welsford being the faster man on paper, I'd say, of the two. And then we've got Edward Teuns, one rider for Trek Segafredo, and Alexander Christoph in here as well. I think he had Gerben Thijssen in there as well initially, but then when the broadcast started, or just before the broadcast started, Gerben Thijssen fell on his shoulder out of the first group and ended up in the 4th echelon or something. So he lost a rider there, which could have been useful towards the end of the race, perhaps, depending on how the race would be going. But knowing how Bora was so outnumbering the others, how do you think they would play this or should play this, knowing that Bennett is not exactly faster than Philipsen and Merlier this year?
I think they would have wanted it to go to a sprint, but it became increasingly obvious that Bennett was completely cooked. He was leaving gaps out of every single corner. And yeah, when coverage started, the gap was 30 seconds to Quickstep pacing, Lotto not really helping. And it just must have been such a hard race. It was Steels and Merkel on the front. And even though Group 1 had people like McClay, Christoph, and Zelig hiding, that gap went out to 115, and Bora were lent on. They had the most domestiques. They had Mayus, Van Poppel, and Mullen, as well as pacing a lot. So it looked like a sprint for Bennett, but then it became clear he was doing his Ken Wevelgem 2021 face. He looked like he was about to vomit, and I was like, surely they know. Like, surely he's going to tell the team he's not feeling good. Eventually, they actually... And then there's Christoph as well. It's just dangerous riders like Christoph in that group. And I also didn't know what Alpecin were going to do, Benji. They've got 2 sprinters. One, they can be better than each other on their day. No domestiques. In Gent-Wevelgem, it was a disaster. And Merlier was even blaming other teams for not chasing.
I think it was Philipsen, but Cycling News misquoted Philipsen as Merlier, so just wanted to correct that swiftly.
Same person. One of them was complaining, and the reality was they should have complained at each other. What was their game plan? I think this is another scenario where they needed to just pick one.
Yep, I agree in that. Like, the thing is, it's not easy to select one of the two. You said it. They're very similar when it comes to their ability to win this race, and they're arguably the 2 best sprinters in that front groups. But you can't control a group if you don't work for one another. And that's a scenario that could potentially occur, as we saw the likes of Bora thinning out. We saw Ryan Mullen starting to skip turns at the back, so something was about to go down when it comes to an attack from him at some point. We saw other riders that were not doing the yeah, the pacing that other riders at Bora were doing. So it was clear that they were being lent on, like you mentioned. And then you know that Alpecin, they need to figure something out for the end of this race, or they're going to have a situation where they're going to be, just like in Gent-Wevelgem, following others and perhaps working both an equal amount, but not one for the other. And as a consequence, if someone goes, they can't control anything. And Ryan Mullen's attack game, that was pretty much, well, it was not going too far. And he attacked quite a few times, I think, Ryan Mullen. But what attacks did you think were the strongest ones?
Casper Van Umden, the DSM rider, was really strong. Turns looked good. I think even McClay was closing things down. I was surprised that Danny Van Poppel couldn't get good separation. But yeah, Merlier was even attacking, which was curious. I really don't think Alberson should have been that aggressive. Speaking of Alberson, by the way, you might have missed it, but on our show partner, Zwift's platform, earlier this week, Van der Poel actually did a group ride in the afternoon, a recovery ride on Zwift. If you don't want to miss other events like that, download the Zwift companion app or check out Zwift free 7-day trial through Zwift.com. Bernal, about a week ago, also did his comeback ride, which I think I had like 5,000 people join it, and he's already doing crazy volume, which that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, thanks as always to Zwift for being the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast title sponsor. But yeah, attacks kept rolling one by one, and eventually one was going to snap because the Alpecin guys, yeah, as we already discussed, one wasn't just closing it all down. And the man who picked the moment, the savvy vet, Alexander Kristoff, it had started raining, loves a hard race, probably not the favorite in the sprint anyway, went clear, no one reacted. No reaction, and I was like, this is immediately done. Because Bora was spent. I think Sam Bennett was getting dropped and faked having a mechanical. And then Mayers had attacked. Van Poppel didn't look great. Mullen had done a lot of work, but he couldn't really close it down. He'd closed down everything for them. And yeah, so I was like, well, the Alberson guys aren't going to chase. DSM were the next strongest. So it was then DSM guys kind of running for podium spots, and they were really good. Casper Van Emden and Welsford. Welsford is a neo-pro, actually. He's a bit older than a typical neo-pro because he's been in the Australian track program, going to the Olympics last year. But yeah, they were really, really strong. And Kristoff, 3Ks to go, 25 seconds, race done. Biniam Girmay and Favelhem. Kristoff, 10th at Flanders. We should have seen this coming. 10th at Flanders, incredible result, and he could have got better. Goes solo and wins like his 80th pro win at Scheldeprijs with Danny Van Poppel. Sort of everyone was sprinting behind in the saddle. No one was really sprinting. Everyone was spent for second, 24 seconds behind. Welsford third. Big result for DSM. Van Uden, rather, fourth. Then turns McClay, Van Bilsen, Phillips and Merlier, 8th and 9th. I think that's not what they wanted. Mullen, 10th. De Lee and Jakobsen were 14th and 15th, 330 back. So what do you think, Benji? What's worse for morale? Would you rather be in the Alpecin bus today or the Quickstep one? Or they're both terrible?
Oh, I'd say that I'd rather be in the I'd rather be in the that's a difficult question. Because on one end, Alpecin fucked up the final, while Quickstep fucked up the echelon business.
Yeah.
So either side must not be happy with how today went, but I guess Quickstep's the attention won't go to the failures in tactics or echelon business that Quickstep did because it wasn't on TV. So they won't get as much backlash from it than Alpecin will from their stuff in the final. But all in all, I think both teams didn't have it that great, and it's another classic that Quickstep is not doing great at. And yeah, at this point, we're going to look at the Hill Classics for savings when it comes to Quickstep, and the hope that Alaphilippe can do something there to spicing things up.
You know what's funny is some of the backlash about the points relegation stuff. People complaining about Arkea and Intermarché running for points. Well, they're winning races as well. Like Intermarché have been unreal. Arkea
Yeah.
have been doing really, really well. Quintana's done well in GC. But yeah, I think I'd rather be on the Quickstep bus because they fucked up as a team and missed it, but at least it wasn't like two guys not being cohesive. Although I don't even blame them, Benji. Merlier's out of contract. He's in his last year of his contract. I don't think he's on a big contract either. I think Philipsen's got he's on a better deal, longer deal than Merlier. Merlier has been asked to lead out Philipsen, and basically he could be a 3-time Tour de France stage winner already. And he was a good guy last year. And I think this is a lesson in Benji. Sometimes it's not always good to be the good guy for your own. Like, there's no reward in the end. Like, if you're the best sprinter on the team, you just won a Tour de France stage, and then they're like, "Oh, can Jasper have a go
Mhm.
in stage 4?" And you do that. That doesn't mean the team's going to pay you what you're worth in 2 years. They might be like, "Well, you haven't won since then." But if you're a Tour de France multiple time stage winner and you're winning other races, you will get big offers. So I don't know. I'm already showing my hand that if I was an agent, I'd sometimes tell my riders to be a little bit selfish. But that's the
Of
reality of the
course.
game. Results pay. That's how you get paid.
Yep. I agree in that aspect. And I also think that's why these two riders don't necessarily want to work together at the final of races like this. But on the opposite side, if they work together on some of these races, for example, if Philipsen rides for Merlier at Gent-Wevelgem and he has a chance of at least fighting for the victory, perhaps podiums, perhaps wins Gent-Wevelgem as a consequence, then we look at today and they do it the opposite way. That way you'd see probably better results for both. So it's kind of right now they've got nothing, and if they work together in multiple races in both directions, then they might have more than they now have, you know?
And this is the problem. If you don't bring Ricard, if you don't bring De Bont, you're going to have these problems in this race if you bring Melier and Philipsen. So it's not
I
even
think
either of their faults.
Ricard's out with a leg injury or something.
You're right. He's
So
got that
yeah,
nerve or dead legs thing he can't get rid of. Um, you're right. Okay. That was Scheldeprijs. Huge win for Christoph. If he comes top 5 in Roubaix, I don't think anyone would be surprised anymore at this
well,
point.
Van Toff has only one decent result at Roubaix in his history, ninth. And
Really?
he has like 4 DNFs or 3 DNFs. He also got 14th ones, but he's never gotten like a top 5 or anything like that. So perhaps this is the year with his form that he currently has, because like we've said it in the RVV recap, like he got top 8 over one of the key hills. I think it was the Koppenberg during RVV. Like a flat cobble section should fit him better. I don't know what the reason was for previous years. I do think in 2019 that he had equipment issues, where something with tubeless tires or something that he chose instead of different ones, and that ended up having a lot of mechanicals for him and so forth. But I'm curious whether he can change that this year with the form that he has, because I gotta say, even the Christoph that won that soapy Tour de France stage in 2020 was not on the level in consistency throughout the year that this Christoph is now, right? Like this
No.
Christoph right now is better than the last, what, 5 years?
Nah, not 5. Come on. There's the disrespect to Christoph. What is he? Maybe you're right. Maybe he's not won 5 years. He won Gent-Wevelgem in 2019. How quickly we
Okay.
forget. Luca Paolini, Christoph, best combination in history of cycling. Otherwise, just a note, the points from Van Uden do not count to DSM's total because he's on the dev team, which is probably a bit of a sore spot for them.
If you think about that, do you think that they should have changed their strategy to focus on Welsford in that aspect, or do you think that that would have led to Alpecin taking better places and they wouldn't?
I think they kind of were doing. I think Uden was working more than Welsford. I think
Mhm.
Welsford's the quickest sprinter anyway. It so worked out that Welsford still finished above him. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not actually sure they'd be aware of that either. If that was Scheldeprijs, quite an exciting addition. Not the sprint finale that sometimes or often happens. It was Christoph solo. The only other note to make was that Lorena Wiebes won the Scheldeprijs Women's Edition, won one race in a sprint, which would have been probably paying $1.05, most locked on thing ever once she made it sort of to the 20 kilometers to go in the group. So yeah, she wins her second edition of Scheldeprijs, and I still think the best flat sprinter in the world, despite Bolzamo's
certainly.
not resurgence, whatever the first version of Resurgence is. But that's all from us today. Basque Country Stage 4 tomorrow. Hopefully it's an exciting one, and we'll see you with a recap of that then. Ciao.